Doing ministry in a prison is to be confronted by an adverse environment. In the affluence of the Western world, we are not often confronted with hardship and scarcity. I remember one of the first times I traveled outside of the U.S. with a study abroad group to Guatemala. One of our destinations on this trip was a hike up a volcano near a small village. The children in the village spent their days gathered around the busloads of visitors begging coins. The painful thing about encountering these needy children was not being able to give a coin to every begging child. Because of the immense need and scarcity present in this small village, I was made painfully aware of how abundant my life was as an American. Although the circumstance is different in the prison, it is also a place of great scarcity. Access to resources like jobs, programs, professional attention, and other amenities are hard to come by in a prison. One of my observations is that a lot of conflicts inside the walls of a prison come from the competition to access resources and opportunities. For instance, upon arriving at my facility, I had to hire a librarian for the chaplain's office. It was in seeking to fulfill this task that I realized I was unable to satisfy everyone in the prison. Upon posting the job in the housing units, I was overwhelmed by the amount of job applications and the shameless jockeying for position that occurred. I received multiple handwritten letters expressing why the inmate writing would be perfect for the position in the chaplain's library. It became very clear during the process that no matter who I chose for the librarian position, there would be a substantial number of disappointed people left in the fray. I knew the unchosen applicants would feel rejection, and it caused me grief to know this. In the end, I hired an inmate who came strongly endorsed by his current supervisor in another department. After word got around that I had hired a new clerk, I was confronted with disappointment and even accusations of being unfair in my hiring practices. Unfortunately, in the prison environment, there are times when no matter what you do, you're going to be seen as unfair. But the heavy truth is, one of the symptoms of grief is anger. Not being chosen produced a loss of hope in those who applied, which triggered grief. Grief is a condition that is rampant inside the prison. As volunteers, it is wise to be aware of the scarcity mentality and reality in the prison. Even when introducing new programs and expanding enrichments on the compound, there's no way to accommodate all the needs of all the inmates housed in the facility. This is why ministry programs like Kairos are so surprising to the inmates. When Kairos comes, there's no shortage of love, food, and cookies. Eat all you want is shocking because inmates rarely experience abundance. We have to accept that a class or group of 30 or 40 people hardly scratches the surface of need. At the end of the day, I as a chaplain will be a disappointment to someone in the facility, either by lacking time or the resources to help them. This for a minister can feel like an area of failing, but in prison ministry, we have to accept our own limitations. Even those who are selected by the staff chaplain to attend a Kairos or other similar events will be limited, and many will not be selected to attend, creating disappointment. But in a way, it also triggers a future hope for those who will want to attend the next event. This reality of need in prison ministry leads us to a deeper dependence on God. It is God who can point us in the directions of the needs that He wants to respond to that day, rather than on what we perceive in our own understanding. Therefore, you need to pray. You need to pray a lot and practice spiritual disciplines that keep you calm and peaceful during the day. The thing we must accept as volunteers and chaplains is that we're going to be in the presence of great need in the atmosphere of corrections. It will be overwhelming at times. As ministers, we make our best efforts to take every opportunity afforded to us to express the love of God by being gentle, kind, and present. Success comes in the small and intentional ways we show kindness to everyone on our path as ministers. Another unfortunate side effect of the scarcity in the prison is that inmates can be very manipulative, seeking to grasp for resources. In the prison environment, we must learn to interact with a healthy suspicion of every request. Learning to gently hold boundaries with inmates can be very challenging when you are not used to having to practice this kind of discernment. Just remember to slow down in your interactions and ask questions if something seems like it is not right. Don't be quick to answer. It may be better to say, "Let me check on that and get back to you." As a chaplain, my job requires me to be constantly considering requests, some of which I am unable to fulfill. One of my inmate clerks said to me, "Trust but verify." He was so right. This is the posture we should have toward those who we serve in the prison. For instance, one volunteer was asked by an inmate to contact their bank and inquire about money that was withdrawn by a family member. Doing this would have compromised the volunteer's status at the prison, since they are not supposed to be involved in the personal affairs of inmates. The volunteer wisely asked me if it was permitted, to which the answer was no. Honestly, if you get in the habit of demonstrating obedience to staff and rules, it will be a positive influence. It is perfectly fine to say, "I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that. Let me check on it." You will only need to say that to a couple of inmates before the inmates will learn that you are not one to manipulate. As volunteers, we must be aware that we cannot interject ourselves in an inmate's personal life, although often their situations are dire and need help. As volunteers, our role is to engage with inmates within the facility. There are ministries that attempt to bridge these gaps, like Prison Fellowship, that have the Angel Tree program, that help inmates get presents for their children and create supportive contact with the families of the incarcerated. There can also be small local ministries that provide outside support. At my facility, Kingsway Ministry attempts to bridge gaps between inmates and their reentry needs. But as inside ministers, we have to be diligent in not becoming involved in an inmate's personal affairs. Inside ministry must stay inside. In many communities, Goodwill Career Centers attempt to bridge the gap of reentry to a community. Often they will provide resources to food, clothing, job training, resume writing, assistance with obtaining a state ID. Some churches and area chaplains are also volunteer to assist returning inmates in the hope of enabling success at a new life. Your community will likely have mental health resources, vocational training, addiction recovery services, and educational opportunities. There may be an active Celebrate Recovery ministry or similar program in your area. You should certainly become familiar with them. You should also consider how you might coordinate your family of faith to work with the various agencies and provide tangible help to inmates who need help as they re-enter society. Understanding and accepting that our role is limited and focused on interactions within the prison will help us maintain proper boundaries and stay within prison policy. This could compromise your volunteer status if you get involved in helping inmates upon release or assist their families. It may be best for you to decide between serving outside or serving inside. You may not be permitted to do both. Because of the controlled environment of the prison, we must submit to the policies limiting our interactions with inmates. Otherwise, we stand to lose our privileged role in the prison as chaplains and volunteers. One question you might have is, how do we share the gospel when so much of our interactions are constrained and dictated by policy? As Christian volunteers, this may feel like a lot of layers of constraint that we must move through. But do not be discouraged by these challenges. I know from firsthand experience that inmates are encouraged by the presence of volunteers and chaplains. I cannot tell you How many times I have heard inmates express deep gratitude to volunteers for showing up and caring for them through their presence. In the monotony of the prison world, whenever someone goes out of their way to show kindness, it leaves a deep impression of God's love for the inmates. Generally, inmates have accepted the constraints of their situation, although they are often frustrated. Inmates will most often respect the boundaries of leaders. As volunteers and chaplains, we must walk a fine line continually. It's like the tension of a rubber band. If it does not stretch at all, it is useless. If it stretches too much, it will break. We must live in the tension between law and grace, mercy and justice, joy and mourning, forgiveness and consequence. When you minister in a prison, you are facing an inexhaustible well of grief, as those who are incarcerated are either actively working through accepting the great losses they have endured and because of their failings, or continue in denial of the depths of their pain and fear and accepting responsibility to do something to change. This is why we must walk carefully in our attitude and communication with inmates. In Matthew 10:16, Jesus sent out his disciples and acknowledges that the world is full of danger and deception. Therefore, Jesus gives them this counsel: be shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. This continues to be perfect counsel for us who are ministering in the correctional environment. There is no need to be harsh or abrasive towards those who you sense are being manipulative. We can be gentle and honest about our limitations within the structure of the prison, but we must cultivate a level of shrewdness uncommon to working in ministries outside of the prison. Loving kindness is the key. Before you enter the prison, look at your face in the mirror. Don't forget to tell your face that you love these people. Be aware of your nonverbal communication. Bring peace and calm in every situation. This will help ease the adversity in the prison environment.